Hello there, Romans here and welcome to my next music review. Today it's going to be Mr. Big, Defying Gravity.
Music review. Music review.
Mr. Big is not a typical band, it is a supergroup. What the supergroup means is that all band members actually had their own music careers long before they released the first album with Mr. Big. Eric Martin, the singer, he already released 3 solo records, first of which was released under Eric Martin Band. And all 3 of these records are actually very good, especially the Eric Martin Band's Sucker for a Pretty Face. It's a great album. The drummer Pat Turpey was also known for performing with musicians like Impellitteri or Ted Nugget, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Billy Sheehan, who was probably the most famous of the 4, played in many projects, but most notably he played with David Lee Roth from Van Halen on his solo records, I think on his first 2 solo records. And Paul Gilbert was famous for playing in Racer X. So I think that it was Billy Sheehan who put together this band. So this is a pretty different music situation, because when Mr. Big got together, all of them had some money, they had a lot of experience, they were already pretty skilled musicians, so therefore they are considered to be a supergroup. Another thing to mention is that at the time when Mr. Big came to existence, that was a sort of a glam rock / hair metal kind of movement. So that was approximately from the mid-80s. Bands like Bon Jovi, Poison, Mötley Crüe, even Kiss, who were part of the scene, all these bands created this sort of a trend that was really that was the most commercial mainstream rock towards the 80s. And there were many latecomers in this period. You got a lot of bands that had certain success towards the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s, like Danger Danger, Warrant, House of Lords, slightly, Steelheart, Slaughter, and many other bands. And all these bands had certain success, they sold a couple millions of records, but then grunge came and the music scene changed. Many people say that grunge killed rock and roll. I personally agree, because grunge did 2 things. It put rock music into another point of evolution, but it also killed rock and roll in that point that rock music was never again mainstream. But that's a topic for another discussion. The point is that many of these bands sort of lost their fame with the arrival of grunge, and Mr. Big was also one of these bands that released their music in this period. So their first album was released in 1989, and it was a very good record. It had a big potential. This is another very interesting thing about Mr. Big, that I never considered them to be a part of this hair metal / glam rock kind of movement, because they were way too technical to belong there. Of course, when you looked at their image, big hair and their clothes and even their lyrics, yes, that was very much in the tradition of this movement. But when it came to their music, I don't think many of their colleagues would be able to play their music. And they belong to that small group of very technical bands, like for example Extreme or even Winger. And their first album showed a lot of potential, but it was their second album, Lean Into It, from 1991, that transformed Mr. Big into superstars. Their song To Be With You was a #1 hit, and that record is truly amazing. It's one of the most classical hard rock albums, and if you like hard rock music and you don't know that record, then what the hell's wrong with you? Of course, their fame was sort of a short-lived, as with the arrival of grunge, the interest in these bands drifted away. Their third album, Bump Ahead, still a great album, was extremely popular in Japan, so that's where they kind of focused on later on, and their song Wild World, which is a cover version, actually, was a big hit up at that point. When they released their 4th album, Hey Man, I think that at that point their music was they were kind of losing it, because the album was more made of acoustic ballads rather than of rock songs. It's been a long time since I've listened to that record, so I don't remember it that well. But then Paul Gilbert was replaced by Richie Kotzen, with whom they recorded 2 albums. I remember that the first one wasn't that good, but Actual Size from 2001 was a very good album. It was more into a pop direction, but it was still a pretty good album. And then the band broke up. They got back together in 2009 when they released a greatest hits compilation with 1 new song. And I remember that I went to Budapest to see Mr. Big at the concert, and I've arrived quite a long time before the concert started, and I've met Eric Martin there. There were more people there, some fans, but we got into talking, and I remember I asked him, like, are you guys planning to do a new record? And he told me, I'm really at that place that I would like to make a new record, but it doesn't depend just on me. And he was actually right, because it took them 2 years to come up with a record called What If, which was their comeback album in 2011. I don't remember that record. I remember listening to it back in the day when it came out, but I would have to revisit it to remember the songs. Of course, I forgot to mention that Paul Gilbert came back with their 2009 reunion. Actually, the first thing that Eric Martin told me was like, wow, you're a tall guy, you're as tall as Paul Gilbert. And I was like, okay. When they released their 2014 album, Stories We Could Tell, that record sort of went beyond me. I never really got a chance to listen to it. Maybe I will in the future. But when they announced a new album this year, I got very excited. And I was like, okay, let's see what Mr. Big brought this time. This is one of the bands that I grew up on listening to. I really like their song. I even practiced a couple of their songs as a singer. I even played, actually, when I had my first band called Bad Pools. Back in 2009 and 2010, we played a song called Daddy, Brother, Lover and Little Boy from their second album. So, all the memories. So when they released the new album, it got me very excited. And I've heard the new album 9 times as of now. So let's get to the actual review. I've heard it took them 6 days to make the new album. It's pretty impressive that they made a record in such a short time. The way it worked was that all of them had some ideas, some music themes. They got together and they did the whole record in 6 days, which is pretty amazing achievement in itself. When it comes to the record, I would say that we can divide this record from a songwriting point of view into 4 parts. The first part is where they play really this technical rock music. It is still hard rock, but many of their riffs are just so technical that it would take a pretty skilled guitar player and even a bass player to play that. Especially the songs Open Your Eyes, the title track Defying Gravity and Mean to Me are among those most technical songs on the record. What I really liked was that when you listen to the first track on the album, Open Your Eyes, after a couple of seconds you hear, okay, we're on. And this is the first thing that you heard on their first album. The very first track on their debut album is called Addicted to the Rush, which starts with exactly the same words. It's like a little thing hidden there for true fans. The song Mean to Me, where there is even a sort of a battle between Paul Gilbert and Billy Sheehan, both of whom are really great players. They just show that, well, most of the musicians would probably not be able to play that. The second part of the songs are more of those pop-ish kind of songs, like for example Green Tinted 60s Minds or Take Cover. So these songs that were rock songs, but they were more melody focused. Those are the songs Nothing Bad About Feeling Good, She's All Coming Back to Me Now, and Forever and Back. All of these songs have a very strong pop melody. For example, the song Nothing Bad About Feeling Good, when you hear the verse, it reminded me of those Latino/pop songs. Like, I'm not really sure what style is that, but if you listen to those songs you can picture yourself being somewhere on a beach, so that's exactly that song. Or the song She's All Coming Back to Me Now has a sort of a late 90s teenager movie kind of vibe. An interesting thing is that both of these songs, I think, are melodically stronger in verses rather than in the chorus. Then you've got a song called 1992, which seems to be like somewhere in between those two styles. So it's got a very technical riff and then a pretty pop-like chorus. Then another thing that Mr. Big are very famous for are ballads. They wrote many great ballads like To be with you, Just Take My Heart, Nothing But Love, Anything For You, Had Enough. And they are especially famous for using acoustic guitars in ballads. And there is also a track like that on the album called Damn I'm in Love Again, where you've got acoustic guitars and string arrangements. And the last part of the songs are those that are more blues slash groove oriented. Like for example, Everybody Needs a Little Trouble, which is a pretty dark song in terms of a riff. Then you've got songs like Nothing at All and Be Kind. So when it comes to songwriting, I think that the songs are very good. This is a traditional Mr. Big. You've got technical riffs, you've got big vocals, you've got strong melodies. The one bad thing about the record is, I think, the production. Now, from the production point of view, the record sounds more like a demo. Especially the sound of the drums and the snare drum just has such a strange sound. It sounds really weird. I think that Mr. Big were going for a live sound on the album and they wanted to sound like on a gig. And the production is just way too sterile and way too cold. And I think that this is sort of a wasted potential because their music really should sound like it's played live. Lyrically, I think that most of the lyrics are pretty traditional rock music. So like 1992 is a self-reflective track that describes the most famous period of Mr. Big. Then you've got, for example, a story of love. Guy messes up things with a girl and he wants to win her back in the song Forever and Back. And some songs about never giving up and hope and, you know, nothing that really stands out for me, but I mean, they're okay. Another interesting thing to mention is that Eric Martin was really a fantastic singer back in the day. He is a very high tenor, so all those songs are more natural for him than they would be, for example, for me as a baritone. I think that he was using a very wrong vocal technique back in the day. He was pushing his vocals from down there. When you listen to the old Mr. Big recordings, his voice sounds amazing. There is just something like that little coloring on his voice, like an overdrive or some drive now and there, which I don't think he did technically. It was more like a natural thing that he could do, but this wrong technique eventually took away some of his voice. If you listen to the last recordings of Mr. Big, his voice is certainly very, very different. It's not bad, it's okay, but I think that he lost a lot of that greatness that he had as a singer. An interesting thing is that he never really holds the notes for like longer than 5 seconds. Just listen to it. You never hear him hit a note and hold it for 5, 10 or 15 seconds. His singing is a very staccato like. He has to push a lot because I think that what he suffers from is imperfect chord closure, and I think that he has to really attack those vocal cords in order to get some sound. But you know, that's just, I'm a singer, so that's what I'm reviewing. When it comes to arrangements, I think that the record is sort of a minimalistic. I don't think that Paul Gilbert uses many pedals or many effects, so it's really like down to having a guitar, bass, drums, and lead and backing vocals. So when it comes down to the score, every time I give a score to a record, it comes down to two questions. First of all, did I have good feelings when listening to this record? And is this record good enough for me to ever want to come back to it again once I'm done listening to it? And the answer for both questions is yes. This was a really great album, a great surprise. Apart from a slightly weaker production, I think that this is a highly enjoyable record. If you are a Mr. Big fan, you will love this album. If you have never listened to Mr. Big, then I would probably recommend going back to the classics, first 2 or 3 albums, but then you can certainly listen to this record. Or if you just like modern, retro, technical rock, this is exactly a thing for you. So I'm giving it 8 points out of 10, which means that this is especially for the fans of the band and the genre. One last thing to mention is that Defying Gravity in Slovak means spierať sa gravitácii. I'm sorry for not including any music demonstrations. I was kind of busy. I don't really have that much time anymore. If you like this review, don't forget to share, to like, to subscribe, to leave a comment below if you like this record. See you at the next music review, gear review, or whatever. Thanks for watching.